Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into what is honestly one of the most legendary, high-stakes, high-style escapes in all of ancient literature. We're talking about a story pulled straight from the pages of the Mahabharata, the infamous House of Lac. Now, imagine being sent to this absolutely beautiful, custom-built mansion, only to realize, wait a second, the entire structure is literally a giant, highly flammable death trap, and it was designed specifically for your assassination. This is the exact terrifying scenario the Pandavas and their mother Kunti found themselves in. So we're going to break down the sheer anatomy of their incredible escape.
It brings up a really fascinating question. How exactly do you escape an unwinnable death trap, especially when the architect of that very trap, an assassin named Purochana, is living right there under the same roof with you, watching your absolutely every move? Look, surviving an assassination attempt like this, it requires way more than just brute force. It takes immense patience, psychological warfare, and honestly, a deeply ruthless strategy. You can't just punch your way out of this one. You have to outthink your enemy, and you've got to make them believe that they're the ones holding all the cards.
Okay, let's dive right into Phase 1, the waiting game. You see, this wasn't some sudden, chaotic prison break. Not at all. It was a completely calculated, slow-burn psychological operation. For a full year, the Pandavas lived inside this highly flammable House of Lac, but they didn't just live there in fear, they lived there cheerfully, seemingly without any suspicion whatsoever. They spent 365 days completely masking their fear and their knowledge of the trap. The goal here was brilliant, but man, it must have been incredibly difficult. They needed to completely drop the guard of their would-be assassin Purochana. And the source text actually tells us that seeing them so cheerful and unsuspicious, Purochana became exceedingly glad. He was totally bought in. He thought he had them exactly where he wanted them. Which leads us perfectly to this quote from Yudhishthira, the virtuous son of Kunti. And you really have to appreciate the cold, calculating realization in his words here. He says, "The cruel-hearted wretch hath been well deceived. I think the time is come for our escape." Wow, this is the moment the trap officially flips. The long con has worked perfectly. You know, Purochana firmly believes he's the hunter, just waiting for the right moment to strike. But Yudhishthira reveals that actually, Purochana is the prey. The waiting game is officially over. It is time to act. This brings us to Phase 2, the tragic decoy. Now, this is where the story takes a rather grim, really somber turn. Because, think about it, to make an escape like this actually work, you don't just need to leave. You need to leave behind convincing evidence that you died. The setup for this dark illusion begins with a feast. Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, hosts a nighttime almsgiving feast. She feeds a huge number of brahmanas, and numerous ladies come, eat, drink, and basically just enjoy themselves before heading back to their own homes. Now, on the surface, this looks like a generous, totally normal festive gathering, but tactically, this feast creates the absolute perfect chaotic cover for the dark events that are about to unfold later that night. It provides a rock-solid excuse for noise, distraction, and a complete disruption of the normal routine. And here is where the tragedy of timing really strikes. Desirous of food, an Nishada woman arrives at this feast. But she isn't alone. She brings her 5 sons with her. The text tells us they arrived as though impelled by fate. During the feast, they become heavily intoxicated by wine. They lose consciousness, and as the text chillingly describes it, they become more dead than alive. Incapable of leaving, this mother and her 5 sons simply lie down in the mansion to sleep. Take a second to think about that. An older woman and 5 young men unconscious in the mansion. That is the exact same demographic makeup as Kunti and the 5 Pandavas. They have just unknowingly become the perfect, incredibly tragic decoys. Right, let's move into Phase 3, the Great Escape. So with the decoys unknowingly in place and the inmates of the house finally asleep, all the pieces are totally set. The execution of the escape is about to begin, and the pace of the night drastically accelerates. Let's walk through this minute-by-minute timeline of how everything unfolds. At nightfall, the feast wraps up and the guests head home. By midnight, all the inmates, which includes their assassin, Purochana, and the tragic Nishada family, fall asleep. Then, late in the night, the environment itself suddenly cooperates with their plan. A violent wind begins to blow. And this isn't just some minor detail, guys. A violent wind is the absolute perfect catalyst when you are literally about to ignite a mansion made of highly flammable lac. This sequence brilliantly illustrates Bhima's systematic execution of the arson. Because this wasn't a random fire, okay? It was deeply tactical. Step 1, Bhima goes directly to where Purochana is sleeping and sets fire to his quarters first. He immediately traps their would-be assassin. Step 2. He sets fire to the main door of the House of Lac, completely cutting off any traditional means of escape for anyone inside. Step 3. He moves rapidly, setting fire to the mansion in several parts all around. He creates an inferno so massive and so instantaneous that the trap is completely sprung before anyone can even wake up. As soon as the Pandavas are totally satisfied that the house has caught fire in several places, they do not stick around. Without losing a single second, Kunti and her 5 sons enter a prepared subterranean passage. The text explicitly notes that the heat and the roar of the fire become incredibly intense almost immediately. They are literally racing through an underground tunnel while an absolute inferno rages just above their heads, with that violent wind fueling the flames into a totally deafening roar. Finally, we reach phase 4, collateral damage and karma. Now, as the Pandavas disappear into the earth, the intense roar of the flames eventually awakens the surrounding townspeople. What's truly fascinating here is the dramatic irony that's recognized by the citizens of Varanavata. When they wake up and see the house totally engulfed in flames, their faces are just filled with sorrow. They immediately know what happened. They loudly lament that the wicked Purochana built this house under instructions to destroy the innocent princes. But look at the incredible contrast. The townspeople fully believe the Pandavas are dead, but they also recognize the swift hand of karma. They say the sinful Purochana has been burnt to death in his own trap as fate would have it. They mourn the heroes, entirely unaware that justice was actually served, and the heroes are currently fleeing for their lives underground. And speaking of their flight, this brings us to an absolutely incredible, almost cinematic final visual. Coming out of the subterranean passage, the family tries to flee in haste, just trying to stay unnoticed in the pitch darkness. But they're completely exhausted from sleepiness and fear, they just can't move fast enough. So Bhima, possessed of this terrible prowess and swiftness, does something absolutely astonishing. He physically takes his entire family onto his body. He places his mother Kunti on his shoulder, he grabs the twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, putting them on his sides, and he takes Yudhishthira and Arjuna on both his arms. Literally carrying all 5 of them, he pushes through the darkness with the speed of the wind, breaking trees with his breast and pressing deep into the earth with heavy, thudding stamps. It is a stunning display of unstoppable strength just to ensure his family's survival. But, as we watch Bhima carry his family to safety, we kind of have to look back at the smoking ruins of the House of Lac. Yes, the Pandavas survived. They outsmarted a totally deadly trap through a full year of patience and a single night of ruthless, calculated action. But the townspeople eventually search the ashes, and what do they find? The burned remains of a woman and 5 men. They think it's the Pandavas, which officially seals the success of the Great Escape. But we know the truth. Those are the remains of the Nishada woman and her 5 sons, innocent bystanders who literally just wandered in for a meal and never woke up. It leaves us with this heavy final thought to consider. When survival against completely impossible odds requires ultimate deception, who truly pays the price?